everybody for joining us here today as we talk about the decision makers, HR, commercial real estate and IT. How decisions are made for the hybrid physical digital workplace. And this is something that's been discussed rather frequently in these times with COVID-19 ripping across the globe, and about how decisions are made for workplace. And we know that it has become a decision that's been elevated through different teams because it's a very complex decision now. So this is what we have here today. We have some really fantastic panelists that you are in a treat to hear from. That come from very diverse backgrounds, and you are in very good hands with Luke Rondell as the moderator. As a way of introduction, I'd firstly like to introduce you to our sponsor today, which is Saltmine. They are the first integrated design platform that unifies people, process, and data to support strategic workplace decisions. With a cloud infrastructure and tailored modules for intelligent programming, design, workflow management, and more, all in one digitized place, Saltmine makes the whole journey of building workplaces an enjoyable experience and positively impacts business performance. They're headquartered in San Francisco, where Luke is located, and have an office in New York City and over 100 employees across 5 countries. So truly global enterprise. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Luke Rondell, who is our moderator today. He is very passionate about technology, architecture, and enterprise as they impact the quality of our world. In his current role as the Director of Channel Partnerships for Saltmine, Luke works with leaders throughout the industry to build a data-driven future of the workplace. Prior to Saltmine, Luke worked for Gensler and the Boston Consulting Group. Outside of work, he's an Ironman triathlete and avid outdoorsman. So thank you very much for joining us, Luke. I'll hand the reins over to you.
Thanks so much, Nikki. I appreciate the introduction, and pleasure to be here with you all today. As Nikki mentioned, I work for Saltmine, a technology platform that's really about empowering corporate real estate teams to run an employee-centered workplace practice. And when I was introduced to today's topic, what immediately jumped to mind for me was this idea of COVID complexities. In that historically, corporate real estate decisions were mostly, if not fully, the domain of real estate professionals. But today the team has grown. So HR is a vocal advocate of employee experience, IT lending their expertise and perspective for the digital foundations of the future of work. And the C-suite spotlight is shining brightly on us from both a regulatory and risk management perspective, as well as adapting to the future of enterprise fundamentals. So lots of cooks in the kitchen. I got a quote from Harvard Business Review speaking about this, where new research from their analytics and services group finds that a majority of business leaders say the quality of remote work has been at least as good as the work done in physical workplace, but that a lot goes into ensuring that remote workers thrive, including having the right technology tools, establishing new norms for engagement and collaboration. And for leaders in digital transformation, it's about much more than just adapting to working remotely, but also to working smarter, more securely, and positioned for the future of digital and physical workspace. So today we're lucky to have 3 esteemed panelists with us to discuss the changing nature of workplace and how their organizations are responding. First up, we have Sarah Abrams, Senior Vice President and the Head of Global Real Estate for Iron Mountain. In her role, Sarah oversees a 90 million square foot portfolio across 1,450 facilities in 55 countries. Iron Mountain does business with 95% of the Fortune 1000 and is transforming its business to support its clients' digital transformations. Prior to Iron Mountain, Sarah was the president of Fidelity Corporate Real Estate, which is the corporate real estate division of Fidelity Investments. Sarah, it's great to have you here today.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Sandra St. Fleur. Sandra is the head of organizational development and learning for UCLA Health. Sandra has been with UCLA Health for about 10 years, where she provides learning and development access for more than 20,000 employees. She creates career ladders through the ecosystem and runs a change management consulting practice to enable continuous improvement throughout the organization. Welcome, Sandra, and thank you for bringing the HR perspective to today's discussion.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
And third, we have Lori Rowlandson, who is a Senior Vice President of Strategy and Information for BGIS. If that full-time role isn't enough, she's also a prolific author, industry thought leader, keynote speaker, and mentor. Lori's newest book, The New Normal: How COVID-19 Has Changed the World of Work Forever, could not be more applicable to our discussion, and we are thrilled to have you with us today. Welcome, Lori. So thank you for all of you for being with us, both panelists and the audience. So let's jump into the conversation today. And Sandra, we're going to come to you with the first question to get us kicked off to begin with, and then we're going to have time for the other panelists to speak to it as well. And what we'd love to start off with, Sandra, is understanding that your organization, all of your organizations, have adopted a component of remote work over the last 9 months in response to the pandemic. Our first question is, who has been part of that core team supporting remote work? And how have you ensured your organization has the resources to remain productive during this time?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. I couldn't agree more that COVID-19 has really not only turned the way we think about work on its head, but is really challenging us to innovate around what I call the borderless workforce. I didn't coin this, but I like it, so I use it often. To give you some context, UCLA Health is a hospital system that is made up of a chain of medical schools, School of Medicine, School of Dentistry, School of Psychiatry. It also has 4 hospitals and 200 clinics. And so the 20,000 or so employees support this system, all learning before COVID happened in person. When COVID happened, 65% of the workforce went remote, and the rest were essential workers in the clinical space. And so the challenge for us first and foremost was that how do we operationalize what was up until that point a benefit, a perk, and really looking at the structural and operational issues related to that. One of the things I did is I had people send me pictures of where they were working. And I do not exaggerate, and it's not hyperbole when I said somebody sent me a photo of their office being an ironing board. Somebody sent me another photo of taking a meeting in their car because their apartment was so small that they couldn't have a meeting at the same time that their partner was having a meeting. So for us, the opportunity became, how do we make it equitable for people to work from home when we had no control over space and we had no control over their personal resources? Because we're healthcare, the other issue that was really big for us is privacy, particularly patient privacy. How do we ensure that the information that is in people's laptops connected to our network wasn't suddenly compromised because people were working in a very different environment? So one of the things I did right away to deal with all of these complexities is pull together a team made up of the CHRO, the Chief HR Officer, made up of people on my team to look at the learning piece. We looked at other pieces like head of operations. And we did 2 things. We asked what's not negotiable for us in terms of safety and in terms of wellness, right? So patient safety and employee wellness. What was the minimum that we needed to do? And you have to remember, this is back in March when we thought 1 month we'll be back. And then we thought 3 months we'll be back. And then, 3 months was like 6 months we'll be back. And so our planning horizon was a lot shorter, right? And we kept thinking, what do we need to do right now in order to stabilize things? And so we provided financial resources. We allowed people to take home some of their equipment. We allowed people to do whatever they needed to do in order to feel safe and to feel like they're being taken care of. The opportunity now that things have stabilized is what happens next, right? How do we formalize this borderless workforce? And how do we formalize it in a way that you have 2 tracks now? You have people working on site and you have people working remotely, and they're perceived to be of equal value, right? That's the big challenge.
Yeah, a ton of great themes to dig in on. Thanks for getting us started on that on a really strong foot, Sandra. And some of what I love that you've put on the table for us is really the employee centricity of this whole project, which is to say, these are first and foremost, you have 20,000 people in your care that you're looking to support during this disruptive time, and gave us a lot of good things to think about in terms of the team that's coming together to support them, and some of the processes that you're adopting. So, Lori, I'd love to come to you as well to chime in on this one. What has your team been like that's been supporting your organization as you've gone through this time?
Yeah, definitely an evolution for us as well as our clients. And I've been involved with supporting both over the last 7 or 8 months, which feels like we're in a bit of a time warp. It feels like it's been 15 years long and gone by so fast. But a few things that we've really focused in on was for ourselves and our own company and our culture. We very much had the ability to work in a distributed fashion, but there were a few things that we've learned over the last few months. One was, I would say we were not an expert in tools like Microsoft Teams. We would use them casually, but now they're dependent. And I don't think we would ever be able to remove that ability from us. Like just regular conference calls feel so two-dimensional. Mm-hmm. And one of the fun things, so I'm the sponsor of innovation within our company. And of course, those kinds of activities, the ideation and storming and norming, really work better in person than remote. So one of the topics people are talking about right now is how do we make sure that we enable people to work with some flexibility and with the ability to enable that remote ability and not at the expense of innovation. And we've really discovered a lot of the tools and the plugins that are associated with Microsoft Teams. And again, there's others with other platforms, but that's just the one we use. And you could do great things. There's all kinds of plugins and yellow pad plugins and things that you can use for that ideation. So we've become our expertise in those types of technologies and all the tools and plugins has gone, from maybe 10% to 90th percentile. So we're much more proficient at those. And I think it would be hard for us to go back. We were also, so our company, we're more technically led versus brokerage led. And so I work with engineers and we like to measure everything. So we were already really well set up for measuring outcomes as a form of productivity. And that really, we didn't realize how well that equipped us for working in these types of conditions, but it really helped enhance the way that we trust and network and operate and manage progress and accelerate. And then I think the other thing that we did was it's really been very different for HR. So we really made sure we were focusing on the HR element of support with ergonomic assessments at home. We've evolved our HR benefits package for our employees. So we used to have gym subsidizations and things like that. That's kind of fallen out of favor, but maybe more home subsidizations, and as well as ergonomic assessments, and just making sure that our HR programs are evolving to be able to support. And one of the biggest things that's come out is around mental health. And we've really been very focused on making sure people feel like they're reinformed about the resources that they have to be able to support mental health. And that is pushed out on quite a regular basis to make sure people feel supported in a different time. Those are probably the top three.
Yeah, those are big. Thank you. Yeah, again, lots of interesting themes we'll continue to unpack. Sarah, maybe we'll come to you first, though, and have a conversation about your organization and your team that you all have adopted at Iron Mountain and with your clients to support work during this time.
Yeah, thank you very much. And the comments that Sandra and Lori made are, of course, really resonant with me and with our organization also. I think we had just switched over to the Google platform as an enterprise in January of this year. So when the COVID pandemic hit and we all had to disperse, we had the Google Meets piece, and we had moved from a Microsoft platform before that. And I would say that was probably one of the most beneficial things that we had when we had to start working remotely. But kind of in a bigger picture thing, I take a look at this, and one of the things that I know for sure, and Lori brought it up, people left quickly. It was almost like you abandoned. If you go into a workplace now, you'll still see all people's stuff is still there. It's they just ran out and left, basically. And the result of that is that it really put a stress test on for everybody about what tools they had and whether or not they would work and could work. So there were companies that were already focused on using these tools, and there were companies that really were not using them at all, and it really had a very office-based workforce. And we saw that firsthand in Iron Mountain when our clients, a lot of large financial institutions, insurance companies, et cetera, had to send home people who were in the middle of important work that would happen, checks being delivered, other things around compliance that would be physically delivered, et cetera. So this distribution of work that happened so suddenly and was not planned for caused a lot of stress. And so from an Iron Mountain perspective, our focus, as it always is how do we help our clients? And what we did was leverage tools and technology that we had to stand up emergency mail rooms for the clients, in essence, basically pivoting our imaging and scanning organization to be able to ingest the mail, the checks, the whatever, and allow this distributed workforce to now be able to deal with them, sort them, and act on those in an electronic way. And what we're seeing now is that a lot of these clients who, yes, there's a lot of content service platforms up there, but those are not things that typically are able to be stood up in a matter of a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. And so so it is giving us the opportunity now to have the conversation with many of our clients around even expanding that set of capabilities that we have that would then overlay on top of it the actual sorting of the materials. I would say for the Iron Mountain space, what's important is, and what will be important in the future, people will fundamentally change as a result of this. The employee is not going to want to be told in the future, you must be in the office 100% of the time. They are not going to want to be told that they have to be remote 100% of the time. That is going to cause a complete revisioning and discussion around what is the purpose of the office and how best can we design and enable a workforce, a workplace to meet this new vision, which is really not going to be around, I need somebody to come in to do their work and sit at their desk all day. And then finally, I would say safety is important. People, there's a McKinsey study out there that showed that one of the top things employees expect from their employer in this time when they come back to the office is that they provide a safe workplace. So how that's communicated, the protocols that are put in place are going to be really important. One of the things that we've done at Iron Mountain is leverage a technology called Crowd Comfort, who has an incredible employee engagement platform that we use with our regular facility management. But in this environment, they have actually again adopted the product so that we have real live time maps where we can see that the cleaning has actually been done. So it's something that allows us to help make the employees feel safer about coming back in the office.
That's terrific, Sarah. And I want to key in on one of the elements that you just brought up, which was that employees more than ever are really looking for safety and security in the office. And to expand that a little bit, I guess I say what I heard from all three of our panelists in that first sort of response was we have a new tension between different elements that we're trying to balance in a new way. So safety and security versus the flexibility to work from home when I want to work from home and to come into the office when I want to come into the office, right? Lori, you talked about innovation, right? Innovation, which historically happens when, we're all in one spot, and we can have that brain meld that happens when we're all in a conference room with Post-it notes on the wall. Sandra, you were talking about equity, equity in a very dispersed physical environment where people have very different home working setups. We're working from an ironing board, and some people have a home office. How do we support, a disparate or the borderless workforce that you mentioned throughout these very different environments where we really don't have a lot of control? And so my next question to the panelists, I guess, would be recognizing that we're in early days. We're still sort of uncovering some of the big themes and big drivers that are going to define the future for us. I'd love to hear about tools and processes that you've adopted or you are intending to adopt as we move to a more hybrid workspace. And Sarah, maybe I'll come back to you. You mentioned crowdsource as one of the, crowd comfort as one of the technologies you're adopting. Are there other tools or processes that you've seen put in place or intending to put in place as you manage the hybrid sort of digital physical work environment?
Yes, I think there's a couple things. One is that I'll just advise that, given the breadth of our portfolio in many countries, we are starting to see some regulation that is that I expect could advance around requirements that an employer must provide to remote worker. So when you start to look at this, you can envision that there might be things that are now things that we're talking about that we might want to do for an employee or whatever that we may have to do for employees that are going to be considered remote. And these could range in a variety of ways. But I do think that that's a trend that we could see coming forward. So what I said about the crowd comfort piece is they've adopted the technology to provide something of value in this environment that we're in. I have seen that with other companies also. In the crowd comfort way, for example, it's an employee engagement thing that allows the employees to engage with the facility people about any concern that they have around their space, and to get an answer, which in most places, when you put in a workforce ticket, you never hear from anybody. It goes into a black hole, but allows there to be engagement, much like there is with the Waze on the driving. And that piece now has been adopted. I've seen it with another company called VergeSense, which is one of those companies out there that that we were using that tells you how many people are in the office, et cetera, for planning purposes. That's been adapted, I should say. That's been adapted to basically show when people are not social distancing properly, so that you can start to see, okay, well, we've let people back in the office and people are supposed to be doing what they're doing. Oh, look, they're putting too many people in the conference room, or, oh, they're all gathering around this cube, and we need to take some action there. So I think those are just an example of kind of two technologies that I would say in terms of what we are doing for our clients. It's really around the fact that we are one of the only companies that can bridge the physical and the digital for somebody that is operating remotely. Most of these other kinds of platforms require you to put all of your information in some place, some central place, in which they can then do your work. Obviously, we started out as a paper document company. We would never say to a company, you have to put everything electronically before we can help you. But we have the capabilities of putting a platform on top of something that bridges that physical and digital world. And so for us, that is something that we're really helping our clients with.
Terrific. Yeah, some really good examples there. We actually had a question from from Amy, one of our advisors, who is wondering about the name of the software you just mentioned. The two I captured was Crowd Comfort, which is, I love that illustration of ways for the workplace. So the ability to more dynamically interact with your facilities group, and then VergeSense, which is the occupancy sensing company that that also has adopted to be more of a social distancing tracking, real-time tracking.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So Amy, if that didn't capture it, shoot another question into the chat and we'll respond to it. Lori, love to come to you from the innovation side. I mean, maybe you can offer a little insight into any tools or processes that BGIS or that you've seen in the industry adopted to really support innovation and some of the more dynamic collaboration that we're while remote.
Yeah, sure, Luke. Well, one of the first things that we did, we are a company of health and safety. We even start our internal meetings with a health and safety moment. Because of our technical nature, we're very focused on health and safety. So we had a lot of the mechanics in place already, which we had to modify. So one of the things that we have is an app that helps us geofence and track our vendors and verify that they're doing what they're supposed to. We extended it to include criteria related to COVID and positive confirmation. You know, how are you feeling today? Have you been out of the country? Have you been in contact? Things like that. And we extended that to our employees as well as our service providers. And we're required as a service provider in many instances to provide positive confirmation that we have a diligent process. So that was, we had to scale and evolve very quickly, but we had a foundation that we had to work with, which was an advantage. Turning to the client side, one of the things that we discovered is many of our clients didn't have robust tools internally to be able to manage the program and deal with ongoing space right sizing. So for example, space planning, reservation, just even those basic tools where they maybe have, you know, delivered what they needed in the past in a very basic way or rudimentary way. They realize now that they need to make a proper investment to have the tools, not just to manage the COVID program, but every head of real estate that is going to be called to the, you know, the C-suite office sometime, if they haven't already within the next year, you know, do we have more real estate than we need? So the planning tools necessary to be able to right size their portfolio across the board. I'm seeing on the office demographic, companies rationalizing a minimum of 20% target of their space, and they need the tools and the data to be able to do that. So we're supporting a number of our clients where they've maybe had some structure in place, making sure that it's sophisticated enough that gives them the data that they need to be able to not just only manage their current situation, but evolve into the future and make sure that they've got a data-driven process to be able to right-size their portfolio, support change management, and making sure that they're making fact-based decisions. And the third item is around employee feedback. So the technologies I've talked about are really more about the physical environment, but I think this last 7 months has been great to push us over the threshold of seeking employee feedback. How do you feel? Even though we might be doing all the right things in real estate, the cleaners are doing what they're supposed to, et cetera, perception becomes reality. And often we saw a gap between the operating practices and perception. And ESAT traditionally has been done as a once a year, it's a lagging process, and I'm not sure how effective it has been. So leading edge companies that we see are better at taking a pulse from employees, providing more iterative feedback, engaging them and their opinions to get more regular touch points and feedback, how they feel. And of course, they're engaged. That's part of the change management process. They're bought in. They feel like they have a voice. So I see technologies really starting to mature related to how we collect and harvest that perception feedback from our employees and really make sure, I think it was Sandra that said it at the beginning, really evolving from an asset or real estate base to an employee-centric place of servitude of what the employees need. So the technical stuff, what the engineers do around the building is important, but it's also important how the employees feel and what their ultimate experience. They're the ultimate litmus of, are we doing a great job? So more technologies in that family as well.
Yeah, Sandra, I guess I'd ask if you could maybe pick that up and run with it. Being on the fully employee-centered side of this, any new tools or processes you're seeing to really engage them in this, now a much more distributed workforce, or I guess for your organization having to balance both the distributed workforce with your essential on-site staff?
The short answer is that a lot of the tools that Sarah and Lori have talked about are some of the tools we're using. But what I've learned is that a tool is only as good as its adoption rate, right? And so part of what we have been really focused on is asking people what tool do they want to use and understanding that it's not one size fits all. We do use Microsoft Teams. And for example, one of the ways that we've worked really hard to keep people connected is by creating these technical exchange groups, right? So these are essentially social groups that organize around a particular shared interest, right? And that shared interest can be anything from I hate Excel, but I need to know how to use it, to something super complex, right? And so we thought Microsoft Teams would be perfect for that, right? Because what can you not do on Microsoft Teams? And there are all these wonderful plugins. But it turned out that for whatever the reason, Yammer was the platform that resonated the most with for this particular effort. And so when you have systems as big as the ones we're talking about, you'll never have just one tool. You'll never have just one software that resonates. I think the opportunity is to ask what is the problem we're trying to solve for? And I think, Sarah, the tools that you mentioned illustrate that point, right? So if what you're trying to solve for is physical distancing, then what's the best tool for that? If you're trying to solve for physical and psychological safety, what is the best tool for that? So one of the things that I absolutely agree with is the need and increase for emotional wellness. And so we literally have a library of apps that we share with people that we fund, and they're all around wellness, everything from meditation to support systems. We now have a Wellness Wednesday where we publish not just tips and tricks, but also where to go for guided meditation that is your local environment based. And so the idea is that know your environment, know your audience. Don't be afraid to ask them what works. I've grown increasingly reliant on pulse surveys, for example, because pulse surveys allow you to not just get the answer, but people can vote on the answers. And so because people can vote or like a response, you immediately see where the energy is. Now that saves me a lot of time, but more importantly, I don't have to sell an idea anymore because the evidence is right there. The crowdsourcing is right there, letting leaders know this is what employees care about. And so I say whatever the tool is that will help you, go ahead and use it, but it will not be one size fits all.
That's
Yeah,
terrific.
Luke, I just want to pick up on something Sandra said, and actually Lori also, and just make the point that the tools enable something. It's not that the tools are not the be all and end all. They are there to enable some very basic things that are necessary for people to have the ability to do their work, but also their mental and physical health. And that has a lot to do with communication and things that the company can do and the leadership of the company can do in the company to let people know that they're valued, that they're cared about, that there are systems and other items in place to help them if they need help. So there's a lot more communication that's going on, I would say now, than would be the norm in our world pre-COVID. And we're using the tools to get, for example, our CEO message out in a much more, what I would say, sort of friendly and more often message, where he does a series where he, shares the mic with somebody, and it'll be somebody from the team that's talking about a particular thing that's important to folks. So there's a lot of effort to actually leverage the technology for the benefit of the people, and also to communicate to folks what it is that we're doing to help make the workplace as safe as possible. And so, yes, we are temperature checking, and we're doing that in 55 countries around the world, and all of the other types of things that we're doing. But, people have to know about it. It doesn't provide any comfort to them if they don't know about it. So how that gets communicated is really, really important. At Iron Mountain, we have a huge percentage of our workforce. The vast majority of our workforce are frontline people that are working day in and day out. So making sure that they feel that they're being protected, that they're given the right equipment, that they're being taken care of properly is really important.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. May I just add something to what Sarah's saying? Because I agree completely. I think the challenge is that in systems that big, if you have a person who is making the coffee and you have a researcher, their access to tools is completely different. And yet they both need connection. They need connection to each other, and they need connection to the wider community. So one of the things that we look at a lot is how do we encourage people to use the tools they do have, right? And what do people have already that we can leverage? And so we encourage the use of cell phones now in a way that we never did before, because it's a tool everyone has, right? And people can literally, we have a text number that they can opt into group conversations of their choice, because that's a way to make sure that a person whose job doesn't even require an email address is still part of the larger community. Mm-hmm. And we have something called Coffee Connect, where you can literally use your phone to connect with somebody from 8 to 9 a.m., from wherever you are geographically. And so the opportunity that we found isn't really identifying the right set of tools, which is key, right? And it's not just about getting people to use them, which is also key, but it's really getting people to see the value to their lives upon using these tools, their lives beyond the work, right? And this need to have community and a sense of connection, and frankly, a sense of belonging at a time when people don't necessarily feel connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the themes we're talking about, which is about community connection, and having a more dynamic exchange with employees. So having that back and forth communication, communicating more frequently, meeting them where they're at. There's a lot. It feels like it's a shift away from maybe sort of more of a organization pushing information at scheduled times out to your employee base, and now it's much more of this conversation between the community that makes up the organization. And so, I think where I'd love to go from here is just looking into 2021. We're in the back half of our hour, and hopefully, looking towards some change in the new year about the state of our world. But I'd love to hear from any of the panelists, whoever wants to jump in, what your organizations are thinking about 2021 with these themes we've put on the table in terms of providing connectivity, but also providing choice, and providing the ability for employees to engage with maybe more self-direction. Love to hear how you're thinking about what that means for your workplace. Is it a hybrid and digital workplace? Is it, and how you're navigating some of the definite challenges and opportunities that will come along with that?
I'd like to start, if you don't mind, because there was a question in the chat box about what do you do about leaders, I'm paraphrasing, but about leaders who are resistant to all of these changes. And I think no matter the organization, one thing we have in common is people who resist change, right? And I think that plays into the future state. You know, the reality is that leaders, for the most part, weren't prepared to lead remote teams. They just weren't. Of course, I'm generalizing, but I feel confident in my generalization. And so one of the big challenges we have is how do we help leaders catch up, right? How do we help them catch up in terms of skills, but also how do we help them catch up in terms of values? There are lots of leaders who believe that people working remotely have inherent benefits over people who work on site. They don't deal with traffic, they can take meetings in their pajamas, et cetera, right? And if you really believe that, it's very easy to ignore all of the costs, right? Whether it's cost to electricity, cost to the fact that you never really have a break, and so on and so on. So I think one of the things we have to focus on in 2021 is how do we help leaders to accept this changing reality and give them the skills they need to lead remotely. Because in my experience in speaking with leaders who I coach, the resistance is in part because of their own fear around having to now manage a remote workforce, right? When they've trained all their lives to lead an on-site workforce, right? So that's a huge part of it. And I can talk about talent mobility, but let's see if we have time for that.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you, Sandra. Lori, what are you seeing at BGIS or in your work in the industry?
I just want to say a hallelujah to Sandra for that last comment. I think that we really need to change the performance-based management of our employees to be much more outcome-based and train that middle management to be more outcome-based in their management. The current HR process is you set an annual goal of objectives, and what stays the same for a year? Nothing. And so we haven't really equipped, I think, a lot of our managers to manage by outcomes in a more agile way. And so when you say people are resistant to change, I often ask like a 2-year-old, why, until you get to the real reason. And often it becomes down to trust and that they don't have a good mechanism for monitoring the outcomes of employees. I do something called a 3x3 update. So every week we manage our team in a more agile way, not wait to the end. And we all know that people can be in the office, shopping for shoes on Amazon on their cell phones. It's just being in the office is not evidence of productivity. So we need to really equip our managers with the ability to manage productivity. Very, very different. I think just a couple of other quick points is I think the voice of the employee, we really need to listen to where they want to work, as well as there's cost benefits and carbon benefits for the employer, but it's not done just for those reasons. It's really around enabling the productivity of our employees. We hire good people. We have to trust them and listen to them when they say that they need certain things to be productive. And then the last thing I'll say is just related to your earlier question, Luke. I think sometimes there's a paradigm, there's a lot of salacious media, death of the office. It sounds so draconian, and I don't think that's the case. I think that we will accelerate in more mobility programs. We've been living in a lab for the last 7-8 months, and we've learned that the business hasn't stopped. We just need to make sure that we are coming back a little bit and providing employees with more options and supporting them on the mental health side, changing the purpose of the office for ideation and collaboration, which will enable more choices.
That's terrific. Yeah, thank you. I love that voice of the employee as putting that front and center with a lot of these decisions. We don't know what the future is going to bring. So to have a hard and fast plan might not make sense at this point. What we do know is the voice of the employee is going to be very important in making that.
I think that's a really important point. We don't know what the future is. That gets to Lori's point about having to be agile. And agile in many ways. Look, those of us have been in the industry for a really long period of time understand that we've gone through many crises at different times. And in each crisis, there are people who think of one extreme. After 9/11, nobody would ever rent in a high rise anymore, or this, that, or the other. And we tend to kind of overestimate, and then the correction is actually not as severe. When I say that, I think about the fact that, though, every crisis that we have leaves behind a tail of some sort, tail as in TAIL. The fact that we all take our shoes off and go through security in the airport, and many of us remember a time when you didn't have to do that, is a tail. It's a piece that becomes forever part of our lives as a result of something that happened. And the question here is, what is the tail going to be here? And that's what we don't know yet. But we're surmising that based on what we've seen, and I think it's accurate. You can't put a fine line on it, but you can say the trend is going to be that there will be more remote work, and that remote work will be better enabled, and things will change and adjust as a result of that. The employee will have more leverage, if you will, in making decisions about where they want to work and what employers they choose to work for based on what kind of environment they will be put in. This crisis pointed out the lack of resilience in our world. Forget about just our workspace, it across the world. The fact that these kind of virus it exists has to do a lot with what it is that has been done to our world, our planet, etc. The fact that it's gotten to humans. Our supply chain resilience, because we've been operating for so long, for the past decade anyway, efficiency. So there is no stockpile of PPE. There's no stockpile of PPE because hospitals can't afford to have tons and tons of warehouse space that they pay money every month for to stock up long stockpiles. So you have warehouses that clear out in 24 hours, 1 million square foot warehouses, because everything's just in time. So what this pointed out is the lack of resilience, and the resilience is going to have to now be built back into the system. And one of the things that we see with remote workforce is it is a resilience play, and the ability to seamlessly move from being in the office to being remote and having that all be technology enabled, so people there is no glitch, there is no bug, there is no whatever. That's a form of resilient play. And the boards of directors of large companies are going to be focused on resiliency, in my opinion, kind of going forward. I do think that we are going to see a downsizing of some sort in the amount of office space that companies are going to need and use when they revision what the office is going to be about. We at Iron Mountain are very focused on trying to help our clients with that in the services that we provide, for example, around Clean Start. It is a program that basically goes in and says, let's understand everything that you have in this office. What actually is non-productive stuff that's here in the office that you could put over to more productive stuff, to people stuff? And how do we deal with that? How can we destroy it? How can we take it off site? How can we digitize it, et cetera, et cetera? So these are the kinds of things I think we have to think about going forward, and with resilience as an underpinning. And that gets down to, and I'm sorry, my last comment will be to what Sandra and Lori were both talking about in terms of the people's own resilience. We have an obligation now to help our employees be more resilient in this changing world.
Yeah.
I know we need to open this for questions. I just want to add to what Sarah said. Sarah, I agree 150%. And I think corporate leaders will play an ever growing role in providing social leadership, because now leaders are having to deal with things like childcare and wellness and think big social issues that aren't typically addressed in the organization space. Now leaders are having to step in and say, in order for us to help our employees to be resilient, we must tackle these big issues that they are dealing with at home, whether it's abuse, whether it's injustice, whether it's economic injustice, all of those issues suddenly cannot be ignored with a remote worker because they're living that every day. And so leaders are playing a much bigger role in dealing with big complex social issues than ever before.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I think to, what we've effectively done by moving remote in a sort of unplanned and, in a moment in time when we didn't have time to sort of control or the change, is we've brought a much wider swath of life into the workplace effectively. Right. So, and we used to go to a building and it was a separate building and we did that and we did work when we were there and we left it and we came home. And that's not the case anymore. And there certainly are challenges with that. There's a lot where we've talked about and unpacked today that we will need to overcome. And we are working on building new systems and processes to manage. There's also a ton of opportunity. I think what we've heard from the panelists is that this can be a really positive change. And it is in many ways about connecting with our employees and our communities and having more of a conversation with those that we work with. So I do want to open it up. If there are any questions, please, anybody feel free to put it into the chat in the next couple minutes. Got about 5 minutes left here. If there aren't any questions, I think we've answered those that are in the chat right now. But if there aren't any more, I've got one more for the panelists, sort of a closing on an optimistic note, which we're going to go ahead and jump into that actually, because we don't see any more. We just got a few minutes left. So questions to the panelists, and Sandra, why don't we start with you? What is one change that you hope persists as we move into the tail from this crisis and we get things back under control? What is one change you hope to see is a part of our new normal?
Yeah, I hope we continue to trust the voice of the employee. I hope we continue to rely on their lived experience to inform the decisions we make about the business, because I think that when we do that, people just are more engaged, they're more loyal, they perform better because they understand that it's a symbiotic relationship between the organization and the employee. COVID really forced us to listen to the employee. I agree with Sarah, that's not going to go away. People aren't suddenly going to go, okay, I can go back to traffic and all the things that working on site entails. So I think we have to be prepared for much more partnership-based relationship with employees than we've ever had before.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sandra. Lori, why don't we come to you next? What's one change that you hope persists as we move into the new normal?
It's hard to pick one, Luke, because my book is case studies of all kinds of informed predictions on how things are going to change in the future. But I agree with Sandra completely. I hope the people aspect will really shine. And we've for once, I think, crossed the threshold in real estate to be about people instead of about assets. But a couple of other things that I think will continue to evolve is, and since this is really about technology, let me pivot and talk about that for a second, is I think that organizations will look at technology with a different light of the business case. So whereas maybe they were struggling to get investment in things like utilization studies or reservation systems or space planning, they've got a completely different business case to get approval and investment for those essential tools, not just for management, but to be able to evolve their own spaces and be able to create the data platform necessary to create an agile work or a hybrid model. All the future of work, it really depends on data. There's still going to be some resistance, and the best way that you can combat perception is with data. So things like utilization studies were maybe great to have to right size your space, but now it actually helps you with a control point to understand how many people are going in and out of the office. It can help you with health and safety. And then other than that, some of the virtual team things I think that are just starting to blossom. We've experimented with gamification to really help include that virtual team and get everybody, rallying around the same goals in a fun way instead of a utilitarian way. I'm really excited to see the potential of some of the tools that I've seen blossom in that way so that we have a little bit of fun at work while we get things done.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Thank you. Sarah, we'll turn to you to bring it home here. What's one change or a change or collection of changes you hope persist into the new normal?
So Sandra and Lori hit all the really important ones. Okay, and I agree with them completely. So I'm going to take a less important one, but a certain self-centered one, or one, which is that I hope we can continue to work in a way that allows us not to have a rush hour, in a way where people aren't spending so much of their valuable time in commuting, so that people can, in fact, be more productive and less stressed for the environment. And I think that this kind of work allows that. It allows things to be sort of smoothed out. I mean, honestly, when India shut down, you could actually see, and I used to go to India a lot, but like you could actually see, like in a time of year where normally it's almost impossible to kind of even be outside. It was clear. So I think there's something there that can be really valuable. On a business side, you know, what I hope stays is some of the work that we're doing with our clients around intelligent document processing solutions, because that basically frees up what has previously been required to be anchored by employees, and allows that to happen anywhere.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we are at time. Thank you so much to our panelists for an excellent conversation. Thank you to all of the audience for dialing in for this hour. At the risk of oversimplifying a fantastic discussion, it's about community, it's about communication, and particularly the voice of the employee. It's about agility and responsiveness to change. And ultimately, I think it's about making work more human-centered. So thank you very much. Everybody have a terrific rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
all.